Hi guys, my name's Craig Edis. I'm the Design Director here at Kula Partners. Today we're going to take you through the processes of design that we undertake here. We're going to talk about everything from the design process itself to how we put together a brief, how we form relationships with our clients, and how we present the work to them at the end. So the process of design here at Kula. We're going to talk about philosophy. We're going to talk about the dynamic of relationships, not just with Kula and its clients, but also with Kula, its clients, and the end user. And this is a huge shift in dynamic that kind of sets us apart from many other design agencies. And the outcomes that we like to get out of this as well. So it all starts at the beginning, and we need to reset certain preconceived ideas about what design, especially art and design, are. So, art and design, two words that go together. You hear them linked all the time. You hear them at design colleges and universities, and everyone thinks that they're one in the same. Unfortunately, this isn't the truth. We need to separate art and design, and it's very important here at Kula that we do this. The big fundamental differences between art and design is that design is objective, art is subjective, and that is a real important thing to note as we go through this whole process. Design is for users. They are third-party people. We don't necessarily know them personally, but that is who we are creating for. We're doing this as a selfless act. Art is subjective. You create something from an emotional sense. It asks questions. Design answers those questions, and that's what we need to focus on. So in a lot of cases, we actually need to reset, not just for clients, but also for ourselves. We need to know what the power of design is, how it solves business problems, and that's a core fundamental of what we look for here. Also knowing like basic things like what brand is. A lot of people think, oh, it's just a logo. Once I've got my logo done, I've got my brand. It's like, no, it's everything around that. It's how you interact with it. It's the voice of the brand, what it looks like, everything about it. And brand is what other people say about something. It's not what an organization says about itself. And most important of all, who the design is for. The design is not for the designer. The design is not for the client. The design is for the user. And with that focus, it makes it much more business orientated and yields much better results. So we change the dynamic here. In many cases, many other agencies work in this kind of model, which is the designer does the work, passes it on to the client, and then the client passes it on to the user. And unfortunately, in that process, it allows for a lot of subjective opinion. And remember, we're not creating art, we're creating design. So we need to shift the dynamic to one that is more focused on the user, where we're creating something that is objective and is solving problems. So at Kula, we work in this way. The designer and the client work together. They sit on the same level, they have the same amount of input, they bring their own knowledge and skills, and they are both producing for the user. So it's neither what the designer or the client wants, it's what the user needs it to be. And by that, it benefits the designer and it benefits the client massively, and we need to focus on that. So as we go through this process that I'm going to show you here, always keep this in mind. We're always designing for the user. Important to start a project, it's always good to set yourself up for success and develop the relationship with the client. So we set expectations. Expectations of what it's going to be like to work with us, expectations of what is expected. So we show and tell the client how we work. It's important to do that. We want to remove any miscommunication, anything where the client won't trust us anymore. We really want to have a strong working relationship with the client, because if you remember the previous slide, we're working together and we need to show and tell the client how we do that, because it is different from many other places. Let them know what to expect. As I said, remove any uncertainty. You'll have a much stronger relationship if you tell them what's going on, when it's going to happen, what's expected, what you're up to, what they need to do. What is your working style? This varies from place to place, and it varies from designer to designer. But clients need to know like how you're going to show them things. Are you going to show them sketches? Are you going to show them mood boards? Are you going to show them certain things at certain times to get their input? So that's important for them to know. Huge thing. What is expected from the client? This isn't just a one-way street, remember, we're working with the client. So there'll be certain pieces of information that they'll need to supply to us. They might need to tell us, they might need to supply brand assets. They might need to give us inside information. They need to tell us like how their industry works. They're the experts in the industry. We're here to translate that information into an effective communication. Timelines and deadlines. This is the backbone of design. You cannot be a designer if you cannot hit a timeline or a deadline. But this isn't just for designers, this is also for clients. So it's important to let them know that they have to hit deadlines as well. We're trying to work towards a goal and we're trying to get work out on time, and they might have a deadline that they're trying to hit. But it's, information flows both ways, and certain parts of the project, they might need to have input, they might need to, arrange certain things to happen on certain days, and we need to make sure that everyone's aligned, that we're hitting those deadlines and they're also doing the same, so we can work efficiently and effectively. And what is the scope of work? Now this is really important as well, like what are we trying to accomplish, get everything down in writing, agree to everything, so everybody knows what they're working towards and what is expected, what the deliverable will be. This goes back to what is expected from them and let them know what to expect. Also, get this in writing. It's super important that you've got something to refer to and they've got something to refer to as well. So a big bone of contention with many design agencies, and I've heard this many times throughout my career, is how many options should you give the client? At Kula, we believe that the most efficient way to work as the experts and bringing forward the design that's going to solve their problem is to show one option. But we do show the right option. And we do this for a process of internal review. We work closely with the client, but we want to make the client's relationship with us as easy as possible and show that we are the experts and we do know what we're doing and we're presenting value to them. And we do that by showing them the correct option of where we believe that they should go with our professional opinion. So the brief, the core of the project. Now this is an important spin on how to ascertain information for the brief. So an important spin that we must put on the brief at all times is we must come at it from an objective point of view. Remember, this is what design is. So the way that we focus the questions around the brief is to ask them in a certain way. So instead of asking, what would you like? We say, what are you trying to accomplish? This is the objective approach to that question. Who are they doing it for? So now we're staying objective and we're trying to identify who the user is, and this is super, super important, remember. How will they use it? Where will the user be? Will they be at a trade conference? Will they be sitting at a computer? It's super important when trying to ascertain how you're going to solve this problem. If they're at a trade conference, you do not want to be giving them a giant manual or brochure to carry around for 3 days at a trade conference. It's not going to work. You have to remember the context that the design exists in. Where will they be? Again, location, do they have, are you asking them to use a website and they might not have Wi-Fi accessibility and it's a big website with lots of data, or they might be somewhere underground. Where will they be? How will they be using it? That's super important to always remember. And because we're looking at this from a business point of view, as always, how you measure success. Are you trying to get a certain conversion rate? Are you trying to get people to sign up on the day? These sort of goals need to be ascertained so that we can measure that, and then we know that we've done a good job and we can take that information into subsequent projects and learn from what's going on. So, example of why we approach it that way. A lot of times I've seen designers make mistakes where they'll just ask, oh, what do you want? And the client will just say something. We need a picture of a tree. That's great. I can do a picture of a tree. I'm a designer. I know what it looks like. It's a picture of a tree. There you go. It's a picture of a tree. We send that back to the client. Client feedback comes back. Why are the leaves on the tree green? It's full. We didn't ask that question. We didn't ask them what the context of the tree was. Why does the tree look so real? It kind of is, they're probably looking for something that's more abstract, more graphical. We didn't ask that kind of question. I don't see the butterfly. What butterfly? You just said you wanted a tree. Again, we didn't ascertain the context of where the tree was, what the situation of the tree was. So we just sent a tree. I want it to be more dynamic and graphical, so it goes back to it being real. Again, we didn't ask that kind of question. It's why it's so important to structure the questions in the brief in such an objective way that we're actually answering these questions before, and we're actually making the relationship with the client much easier. They don't need to think, oh, have I told them all this stuff? It's like you've got a structure that allows you to extract information as you need to. What they actually wanted was this, much different. You've got the butterfly, you've got the graphical nature, you've using that to be more abstract and therefore enhancing the colours so they look more fall-like. Endless possibilities. Whenever you start a brief, there are literally a billion possibilities of how you can answer the problem. We need to give it context that helps us narrow it down, because remember, we're trying to present that one perfect option to the client. We need to ask questions that start to narrow it down. And using the formula of what are you trying to accomplish, who is it for, what they're trying to do, those are the sorts of questions that can help narrow it down. You're immediately eliminating certain routes that you can take to finding the answer, and those are so important. Even within a simple request of, say, a letterhead, there are many possibilities of how you can answer that. You could put design on the back of the page, you could put lots of graphics, you could flood it with colour, you could use different types of paper, you can put their logo in different positions. There's lots and lots and lots of ways that you can approach that, and we need to kind of work with the client to figure out what they're actually trying to accomplish and what the user is going to respond to, and that's where we need to put the focus on the design. What will ensure that the user relates to it, even on a subliminal level, it's super important to do that. So we need to find out what the mood of the project's going to be and the tone. Like, how does it feel? What does it feel like? We can, we're the skilled ones in that area that can help the client capture those thoughts and the feelings that they have about their brand and what they want their product to be, or how they want to approach the user and what kind of mood is the user in. Are they doing something where they're happy or sad, or enjoying themselves, or it might be work focused or it might be pleasure focused. We need to ascertain that so we can set the mood and the tone of the project, and identifying the user. So who is it for and how do they feel, and what mood and tone will reflect what will communicate best to them. And then identify the outcome as well. What do you want the user to do afterwards? Like, you've connected with them and then you want them to take an action, and that is what good design should allow them to do. So this is how we start to structure the brief here at Kula. This is something that I've developed over a few years to make it very easy for both the designer and the client. So we're not inundating the client with like too many questions, and we're really structuring. So when I'm going through this, I want the client to focus on each little element of it and then just really submit themselves to just focusing on that, and it gives me a much better and clearer picture, and then I'll reiterate this. So what I have here is a bunch of words with a bunch of numbers in between, as you can see. Each word on either side is the opposite. And I just get the client to just go through each one and just rate based on the 1 to 6. So obviously 1 is very much weighted in one way, 6 is very much weighted in the other way. We try to sort of ignore 3s and 4s. It's kind of sitting on the fence, but it's the 1s, 2s, 5s and 6s that will really help push the project. And this is what is giving us our mood and tone. So we've got things like, should the project feel traditional or contemporary? Should it be based in fantasy or reality? Is it for business or is it for pleasure? Should it feel casual? Should it be professional? And so on. Really important to gather this information. There's a nice mix here where it kind of, it starts to cut down those billion possibilities into something that becomes quite unique as well. Then we work on what type of user it is. And this might be many users. Like, we often have many personas with the clients we work on here, Kula. So we might have like 1, 2, 3, 4, as many as 5 or 6 of these for each user, and it really identifies what type of person it is as well. So this is how we're going to connect to the user. Are they a passive person or an aggressive person? Are they a fun person in this situation where we're trying to talk to them, or are they serious? They might, it might be a high-flying businessman. Are they a traditional-minded person, or are they a contemporary-minded person? And so on and so on. And the mix of the two really starts to, again, narrow down where we're trying to go with what the project should be and what the ultimate answer should be. So again, taking that objective look at things and looking at these are the problems that we're trying to solve and this is who we're trying to solve it for. This then dictates where we go with the answer. Really important, cannot stress this enough, listen to the client. They bring so much important information. It's so great to harvest that. There's such great depth in their knowledge. They are the experts in their field and we are there to interpret what they need it to do. Aligned with their strategy, everything we should be doing should not be done on a whim. It should be done for an important business decision. So align with any strategy, any goals that they're trying to do. Make sure that the design is doing what they need it to do from that point of view and connecting with the users in the right way. Beware of the words that they use. Clients will talk in certain ways, they'll get excited about certain things. Those are things that are really important to pick up on, and those things can be added to the brief. They might describe things in certain ways. That might be a way that we then reflect that in the language you use in a design or the way that we structure something, colours that we use. Anything can be kind of dictated by any words that they use. Some words may be overly elaborate, some things you might need to clarify, but certainly pay attention. And anything that they do say, and if they use a word a lot of times, just clarify what exactly they mean, just so that you're on the same page that they are. Identify the stakeholders. It's super important that everybody who needs to have input on a project has input on the project. So we need to make sure that, if the CEO wants to, if he's got some preconceived ideas or anything where he kind of wants to go that he hasn't necessarily communicated to everybody on his team, that he is involved and he has his moment to sort of put those ideas forward. So it's super important that we get everybody involved that needs to be involved. And this is really important as well when we come to later on in the project, when we're presenting, that we don't want kind of anyone showing up from, from Kula's point of view or from the client's point of view and sort of say, oh, I had this idea and it should have been this way or that way. We want to get those people in the room early on and make sure that everybody's kind of having their moment. Obtain keywords. I was just talking about really paying attention to the words that the client uses. This is really important for the keywords that we're going to use when creating the brief and then when presenting the work. We want to show that the client's input is really important, and we're going to take those keywords and we're going to show that these form the backbone of what our response was to the brief and that we're solving the problems. And it's also important that the client feels that they're being listened to and, they've had their input, because we're going to kind of, often, I guess the client would feel that we go off and we do our own thing and then we come back and present. It's not quite the way we would like to work at Kula. We like to keep the client very involved. We want to show that, look, we're listening to you. Your input is very important. And, you really are helping us form the solution to the problem that you have. Reiterate the brief to the client. So we've got everything down that the client's given us. So it's really important just to go back and just make sure that everyone understands what we're trying to accomplish, that they haven't kind of given us some misinformation, that they've used a word and they shouldn't have, or we've interpreted it in a certain way and we shouldn't have, that everyone knows what the outcomes that we're trying to do, and most important of all, that everyone understands and acknowledges who the user is, because that is ultimately who we're creating for. So it's just always good just to go back, it's just a quick 2-minute, 5-minute thing of just saying, okay, this is everything that we've got. Is this all good? Do we have every piece of information that we need? Then it's the easy bit. We do the work. As designers, we know that what we're doing, shouldn't be any problems there. We've got our own ways of working as designers, and as long as we're kind of working through that process, it's super important. But make sure that you're constantly referring to the brief. Remember, this isn't for you, this is for the user. So we have to make sure we're going back to that brief, weigh up any design solutions that you're coming up with or any problems that you're solving. Make sure that you're solving them in a way that answers the brief. Challenge the design against the user, the mood, and the tone. So that it should feel like it says in the brief. It should feel warm if it says that it needs to feel warm. It should feel sophisticated if it says it should be sophisticated. This should influence type choices, colors, placement of graphics, image choices, pretty much everything. And you can always weigh this up against the user mood and tone to make sure that you're on track. Remember, it's not what you want. Objective approach to design. So if you're like, oh, I saw this great thing online and I want to kind of bring that into my design because it looked cool. Don't do that. That only if it answers the brief. It's a very hard one to get across, get past, and it's something that designers must learn to do. It's not what you want. An important one to do, like we're running businesses and the client's trying to run a business as well. Be cognizant of how much potential money you're spending. Is the solution within a reasonable budget? Are you trying to do something that's a little bit too crazy in the way that you're going to be spending the whole budget in just one small area? So even when it comes to a web solution or a print solution, just make sure that you've got those numbers ahead of time. You've asked the client how much they want to spend on printing, how much do they want to invest in the project, and make sure that you're coming up with solutions that are feasible within that. We all want to do as much creative stuff and answer the brief in the most creative way, but we shouldn't be doing that. We should be doing it in the way that is correct, and part of it being correct and objective is also building something within a budget. Know the limitations. If you're trying to do something kind of cutting edge or something, know that it might work or it might not. Have a backup plan. Don't kind of throw all your eggs in a basket. We like to know what we're doing is correct rather than assuming what we're doing is correct here at Kula. So it's important to know what the limitations are of technology or anything else that we might be getting into. Do your research, and not just research into just the direct field that the client may be working in. Also look at brands that might share values, the same values that the client has. It's also an important comparison to make sure that it feels right. It's kind of that goes back to the mood and tone. That's where other brands can really come in play and make sure that you're working in the same sort of area that they're working in, as far as the feel of it and how you approach the design and how they're connecting with the users. There might be a user that shop at a certain place that shares values with what your client's trying to have. So they're obviously attracting the same user, they're just probably doing it in a slightly different way, but you can certainly garner a lot of information from that. And the research is really important when we're going back to the client, that we show them that there's depth and there's logic to what we're presenting to them. A mood board, again, very important to put together, shows the client that, again, the research that we've done, and it also helps focus the research as well. We will use this in the presentation, and I'll show you how we do that later, but it's very important to do that. It shows the visual representation of the words and the mood and the tone that the client is trying to put forward for the user. So very important to put that together. And super important, especially here at Kula, is get peer input. Nothing goes out without myself seeing it or one of the peers in design seeing it, and that works across the board. Very important, it's basically works as a good gut check that what you're doing is correct. They can look at the brief and they can be very objective about it and say, look, this doesn't feel like it should do, it's not communicating to the user in the right way, and just making sure that everything is on target. So then we move into the presentation. Now this is a very structured thing. You're going to be giving a lot of information potentially to the client, and we want to help the client understand our approach and how we've been working, and they might not have seen anything for a little while, so it's very important like how we bring them into the presentation. So there's certain rules to a presentation that I always like to adhere to. Know, understand, and have faith in the work. If you're not sure, we should not be presenting it to the client. It's not the right answer. So we have to be sure that through peer input and through communications with us and the client, that the work is, what we're going to show them is the right answer. Find out where and how you're presenting. Very important. Like, are we doing it over the phone? Are we going in to visit the client? Do they have a setup of a projector or something like that? Just a nice way to sort of bring yourself into the room with them and you'll feel better and they'll feel better if you're not kind of rushing around in a panic trying to get a projector to work and you haven't got the hookup cable and everything else. So it's always good to know you're doing that. If you're presenting, online, that you've gone into the Join Me room and everything is set up there and everything is good. Funny one here. This is one that everybody does, whether they're an internal Kula or they're a client or whoever it is. If you give somebody a printout of a presentation, the first thing they do is they'll look at this last page because they want to see what it looks like. Because everyone's really excited about seeing the design, and that's a great thing. But Give them a printout at the end of the presentation. As a designer, you really want to control how you're putting this information across. Like I said, there's a lot of information that's potentially going to come across to the client here, and we want to present that in a nice, steady way. If you give them a printout ahead of time, they look at the last page, they might not like it because they don't necessarily see how you've got to that. You've then got to try and win them back, and never a good approach to do it. We want to lead them through. Make sure all the stakeholders are present. Again, goes back to, if there's a CEO or, anybody in any other department that might have a say in, we really want them there for the presentation. It's super important that they hear the logic and the argument and the debate or any feedback and anything else that formed the solution. Taking it out of context and anything like that can really ruin a presentation, and they're not necessarily being as objective as they should be, and we need to make sure that they're there. They also get to hear how we've incorporated their input, and that that they've been a great part of putting the work together. So really important that everybody is there. Don't overwhelm the client. Don't overwhelm the people at at Kula or anyone else. We want a presentation that leads people through. Give them little bits of information. It's basically the approach that we take to, website design or anything else, where you give people just a few things to digest at certain points so that they're not getting overwhelmed with making too many decisions and trying to understand too many things. So the core elements. Presentation should have emotion. How does the user feel when they're interacting with the solution? Why is it? It starts to build empathy with the user and connects everybody to it. The presentation should have a story path, not in the fact that it, once upon a time or anything like that. It should be more the fact that each slide leads from one logical step to another logical step. Don't jump around. It really throws everybody off and they lose where you're kind of at and what you're trying to communicate. It's not an effective way to do it, and you'll lose the room very quickly. And it should be based in logic. We're designing and not creating art. Everything has a reason for being there, and everything has an objective reason for being there. So show that this is blue because it needs to be blue. We use this font because this is the correct font to use, and everything is based around the brief, and everything is based around the user. If anyone's got any questions and goes, oh, why did you pick this? You should be able to answer that. That is the sign of a good designer. Level of polish, always one that kind of fluctuates depending. It's enough to convey the idea. It could be the finished piece, it could be a sketch. You could do it in multiple stages where you show a sketch and then you take it a little bit further and add some color and then you polish it off, and we do those over, we could do those over a few presentations to the client. So it's enough to convey the idea, and also the amount of investment. The client's paying us to be as efficient as we can be in producing the best solution for them. So we need to be cognizant of the amount of time that we're spending and that we're not wasting their budget in, presenting stuff that we're not sure if we're quite in the right direction. So do a little sketch, go to the client, present that to them, see how they feel about it, and then go further. So a lot of cases kind of rework the system so it works a bit better in presenting that to the client. So set up the presentation. Make sure there's no surprises. You don't want to be going into a presentation and showing a client stuff that they did not expect. Everything should be there. They should know what's coming next, and you should almost be anticipating what's coming next from their side of things and what questions they might ask. Tell the client how the presentation will be structured. What should they expect, going back to no surprises. Then reiterate the brief. Not everybody might have been there from the beginning. You might have some new people in the room. A certain amount of time may have elapsed and people have kind of forgotten they've been working on other things. Good to just remind everybody what we're trying to accomplish and why. Define the user. Very important, because again, we want everybody to be objective from the client side as well as our own. Just informing them who the user is and reminding who that is very important. Then they can weigh up what they're about to see against, does this communicate with that type of person? Are we doing it in the right sort of way? Show that the client's input defines the solution. One of a working relationship that works both ways, where we're working together, we're basically injecting ourselves into their organization. So it's very important that they feel that they've had input, and input, as I said on the previous slides, like they have all this inside industry information, and we want to show that, look, we've been listening to you and it's been great input, and look, this is basically your idea, we're just translating it for you. When you want them to ask questions, like, you're going to be giving them a lot of information and they're going to be trying to remember everything. I find the best way to do this is just to say, okay, I'm going to run through to a certain point, or if it's a shorter presentation, I'm going to run through the whole presentation. Save your questions to the end. It kind of breaks the flow of the presentation if you've got questions coming after every little piece. And a lot of times you'll actually end up answering their questions on a subsequent slide. And I think a good presentation does that. I think you structure a good presentation around what you know they're going to ask and what you know is going to come next as far as like any questions or concerns or anything else. So just asking them to just save their questions just to a certain point or to the end just makes everything kind of flow better, and it doesn't kind of throw you off as the presenter, and it helps everybody in the room stay focused on what's going on. They can make notes as you go, and like I said, we'll probably answer those as we go through the subsequent slides. So what we have here is an example of a presentation that I gave to a client, and it just gives you a nice indication of how we structure it. So what you're seeing now is the keywords and phrases. So I've already gone through all the preceding slides information. I've given them like who the user is, what the brief is, what we're trying to accomplish, and all that stuff. And now I'm moving into keywords and phrases. So these would have been, as I said, these would have been the words that the client gave us, or they would have used, or they would have been some extra ones here that would have been added through the research that we did, or what we sort of developed through the mood board. So I like to go back and just remind the client that here's your input here, and it's been really great informing everything else. So in this case, it was elegant, sophisticated, cosmopolitan, international variety, mix of traditional and postmodern, and personality. Those are the things that need to come into it. So based on who they were and what the user that they were trying to attract and how they were about to go about that, then we put together the mood board. So everything that's here on the mood board, this is all going to come into play when we get into the design. So I want the client to know and understand what's going on here. So I'll pick out certain things within the mood board, you know, certain patterns or colors from each image is the things that I want them to focus on. From there, this client in particular wanted to do a slight logo modification and just simplify things. So again, I'm not trying to overwhelm the client, I'm just breaking this down into simple elements. If I'd just shown a whole idea and a whole concept, that's a lot of information to take in. So I'm just breaking this down into bite-sized chunks. So on the left here, we've got the original logo, in the middle and on the right, we've got the adjusted logo. So they just wanted to simplify things. There was various technical issues with the logo, so we wanted to address those. And I'm also relating this back into the mood board that they saw. So the shape of the logo here obviously takes from the shape of the original logo, but it also takes from the shape that was in the bed head on the mood board. Again, I'm tying things back to the mood board, which is tying back into the keywords. So they've given me the solution to this. Then we want to talk about color palette. So I'm taking elements from the previous slide and I'm bringing these forward into this side. So blue and the white are their existing color palette. And in this case, the client wanted to have different color palettes depending on the time of year. Across the middle here is we've got the main color palette, which would be the core brand color palette. Again, this is taking cues from the mood board, which is taking cues from the client's input. Across the bottom, we then have like bespoke color palettes depending on whether it wanted to be winter, spring, summer, or fall. And these all go back to, you know, where we kind of wanted to take it with the mood and the tone. So they want it to be more contemporary and more cosmopolitan. So based on the research and everything, this is where that logically led us. Again, just bite-sized chunks at this point. Typography, what sort of fonts are we going to use? So we've got two fonts in this case, Gotham Thin and Bodoni, just showing the client how these kind of work together. So you've got that mix of traditional and contemporary. It's kind of got that nice flavour of the mix together. Now I can bring them into a layout. I'm bringing everything together in this example. So this is just one concept layout. They already had a tagline that they wanted to use, which was International Fair Urban Flair. So I'm using the logo. They've already seen that. They don't have to worry about, well, what do I need to know about that piece? The stripes on there are from the tablecloth on the mood board. So I've already imprinted that into their head and they've already seen that. The main illustration, they've already seen that. That was on the mood board. So I'm just incorporating that in. And then the use of the tagline, which is already their tagline that they wanted to use, so I've incorporated that. So basically all I'm having to convey on this slide is this is the type of layout that we can do. And working back into some of the shapes that they saw in the mood board that they liked, that is being brought into here. So I'm really cutting down the amounts of elements that they need to consider as new elements. They've already got this information in their heads. So the next logical step from here is, what if I want to add more copy, or I don't want to add more copy? So there's different ways that you can use it. So in this slide, I show the client what the flex of the layout is and how it's great because, look, it allows us to, in the first one, have that kind of standard look. It could be an ad or something like that. And the one on the right removes all the copy, so we could just really focus on an image if we want to, and you've still got your branding in there. Or we could do something that's more like a print ad, which is bringing more copy in, whereas, the one at the bottom there. So it allows them to sort of see what the potential is. So now I'm just, just stepping it up to the next level. Then I know the question is going to be, well, that works great for that size, but how does that work for other things? We want banners and we want print ads that could be different sizes. So I give the client an example of, say, the one on the left, which could be like a banner image. The one in the middle is more of a print ad kind of style, and the one on the right could be like a billboard or something like that. So it shows again like the diversity of the layout and how that works for them. So I'm showing the logic that's gone into this, and remember, this has all come from those keywords that have led to the mood board, which has led all the way through to this step. Now, the illustrations that are in there are from a guy called Jack Hughes. He does many illustrations for like Gucci, some very, very high name brands. I wanted to talk about this. So I'm basically just parking everything aside and I'm coming to address basically what is the elephant in the room, because I'm not sure if the client, I'm being cognizant of budgets, I'm being a responsible designer. I'm talking about now Jack Hughes, who is the focus of the ads that we've done. Now, Jack Hughes is not cheap, and they are probably not going to spend the budget, but hey, it's worth a go. You never know. So I include that into the presentation, and I explain who Jack Hughes is and what's going on there. And I know what they're going to say. They're going to say, we haven't got the money to pay for that, you failed on the design. But I know they're probably going to go there. So I show a photo manipulation of, hey, look, that's fine. You don't want to pay for Jack Hughes. That's great. That's no problem whatsoever. Look, I'm a responsible designer. Here is our version of doing, something that's taken from inspiration from Jack Hughes. We're doing our own kind of thing with it. This is what I can do in Photoshop for you guys. It will cost you nowhere near what it will for hiring Jack Hughes. Aren't I a responsible designer? So the client kind of feels a little bit more relaxed at that point. And then I bring that back in and substitute into, look, it looks just as good as the Jack Hughes stuff. Well, not quite as good because Jack Hughes is amazing, but it still works within that context, and it still has that feel that we want to get as well. So I'm showing the client two options, but I'm also predicting, look, I'm being responsible and I kind of know you're not going to go for spending all this money probably. Here's a cheaper alternative. Always important to give context to things. Anything that kind of exists in the real world, or even online, I guess, as well, is always show what it's, put it in context with where it's going to be. If it's a web ad, put it on a mock-up of a page. If it's, in this case, a banner, mock it up so you can see scale and you can see how it interacts with the elements. Does it stand out enough? Is it unique? And, does it give that flavor with the environment? So it's always really important to show that to clients. It just helps everyone kind of, takes it off the page and just makes it a real thing that could have already happened. In the case of this client, I just wanted to address in the presentation how it works with other brands. They're a brand that is kind of what I call a holding brand. So they have lots of other brands within them that kind of need to relate and interact. So I just did a couple of quick mock-ups for them, just taking, basically it's a restaurant, the Bicycle Thief, adding their branding in there. So they control the main part of it, of the ad, and then Bishop's Landing controls the corners, and we're still keeping with that overall arching design concept and just reworking it to hold that. Next to that is just another version as well, just so they can kind of see how that kind of will work. And that brought us to the end of the presentation. So after that, obviously, we let the answer any questions, we let the client digest. We don't necessarily need any feedback then and there. I think it's important for people to kind of go away. They've seen a lot, we've given them a lot of information. We've done it in a way that they can digest that and understand it, hopefully. But it's good, we don't expect feedback then and there. We can have them go away and think about it. That's when we can give them the printouts if they were, physically in the office, having the presentation to them. Or we can send through a PDF and then they can get back to us whenever they want. However, it is important to structure the feedback that comes back from the client. So this is the way we'd like the clients to really approach giving feedback. So does the solution represent the brand accordingly? They know their brand, they know what they stand for, they know their values. Does it represent that in a positive light? We're not showing that they're too childish if that's not the way they should go, or anything that's sort of negative towards their brand. So is it representing the brand accordingly? They should be able to answer that. Does the solution solve the project goals and convey the message effectively? So basically, have we answered the brief? Is everything in the brief in the answer? And that's really important. And the most important part of that is it communicating to the user? And then, does the solution encourage the user to take the desired action? Does the user feel the way you want them to feel? Are they going to click on what, have we drawn enough attention to a CTA and they're going to click on it? Is everything weighted in the right way? Like we're focusing information in certain ways, like we're delivering this piece of information and then this piece of information. Is the user going to pick up on that in the right way? And that's how we want feedback to be structured. You'll notice in these questions, never once do I say, do you like it? Because it's not for the client. We have to remember that. It's for the user. It's not for the designer, it's not for the client, it's for the user. This is design, this is objective. We're trying to solve a business goal here. So we really, really, really cherish their input. We want it focused around, are we serving the user? Because that is going to give them the best returns and make for a happy brand that people invest in and they understand, and not just the focus of one person, whether it's a designer or a member of the client team. So when feedback comes back, our last part, ask questions about it. They're like, oh, this isn't quite weighted in the right way, and you understand it. Don't take it on face value. Ask, don't forget we're working on the same level as the client, and there's very much back and forth in communication there. So, they should be asking questions of us and we should be asking questions of them. It's really important because then everyone's understanding. Something might be miscommunicated in a slight way. Someone uses a word out of context and, it kind of skews everything off. So not only just important during the briefing process, but also during feedback, that we're just asking questions about, oh, why did you not think that's doing what it needs to do? How should we reapproach this solution? Keep the client objective and focused on the user. As I said, very important, because that's who we're creating for. We're creating for the user. They might come back and go, oh, I don't like green. And you're like, okay, that's fair enough. But how will the user not like green? How will the user feel about that solution? And will they share the same values as you? I'm a great believer that the client can't be the user, because you've got to be objective, and it's very hard to separate yourself. So it is it is quite a thing to get your head around, but it makes so much more sense and it leads to a much better business relationship. You can say no to a client. We are very much working with people, that we're part of their team, they're part of our team. You can say no to people, that's fine. Have a reason for saying it. You can't just go, oh no, I don't like it because it messes it up. Try and work with that. Have reasons like, oh look, this doesn't work, but how about this? We should be able to present other alternatives, like even if it's internally, if somebody's coming up with an idea and you're like, I don't think that really works. Have a reason for it and then work with that person to find a solution that does work. Just be aware of, scope creep, where we're at. Is everything within budget? Are they like, oh, I had this idea and we want to do this thing now, you've inspired us, which is a great thing to do for the client. Is we want to inspire them, we want them to see get excited about the solutions we've come up with. But just be aware if anything comes back and it's like, oh, that sounds like, that they've got an idea about adding some new functionality or anything like that, we just like to keep that in mind. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. Well, thanks, guys. I hope you have learned a lot about how we approach design here at Kula, which is very much about the objective approach, and we're very user-focused. Goes back to our tagline of people matter, objects don't, and I hope you found this interesting. Thanks a lot.